Joining us on the Bison Automotive Live Line this morning, James Faluszczak, who is a former priest and abuse survivor, joining us this morning, was also part of a news conference yesterday highlighting some of the details on this case of Father Jeffrey Nowak, who was a Buffalo Diocese priest arrested on child pornography charges just the other week, and some of the details continuing to emerge about this case. James, thanks for joining us once again this morning. You know, this case, hearing this story, it's opening up a lot of old wounds, raising some new questions of people who have remained with the church during years now of scandal. When you heard this story, what was going through your mind?
Good morning, and thanks for having me back on your air. My first reaction was absolute disgust over the nature of Father Nowak's crimes, and the descriptions that were given in the arrest filings really don't require any kind of sensationalism. They really are absolutely disgusting. And so that was my first reaction. And almost immediately as well was my recollection from, I think, the original revelation against him having sexually assaulted seminarians was back in 2019. And it really is upsetting to me as a former priest. I really do consider myself still a priest, except I really can't function within this system as it is. When I came forward, the diocese stopped paying me, took away my residence and my health benefits eventually. And this criminal, this creep, got to have those benefits, at least partially, all these years, with the knowledge that he had assaulted seminarians. And so Bishop Fisher's rush to make it clear that he's no longer being paid or anything like that really is kind of cold comfort at this point, because that should have been settled years ago, and they should have been supervising him. That was kind of the point of our news conference yesterday with Bob Hoatson and attorney Mitchell Garabedian, was that this guy obviously was not adequately supervised.
Right, and so many people are upset that he was placed on administrative leave in 2019 and getting paid all this time and no attention being paid to what's going on with him and his mental state. But now there's a big call for the diocese to release his secret files. This is canon code. What would be possibly in those files that everyone's calling on the diocese and Michael Fisher to release?
Well, probably one of the first things, first of all, he would have his seminary evaluations. He'd have psychological evaluations from his time in the seminary. We know that the era in which he was formed at Christ the King Seminary was rife with a subculture, I think, that permitted him to act out against other seminarians. He was overseen by Father Joseph Gatto, who's now on leave a couple of times, disgraced, but yet he has still been able to serve. So the earliest files from seminarian Nowak's interactions with the diocese would be in those files. And then more recently, any complaints that were made by those seminarians that he assaulted should be in those files. Any kind of treatment notes, if he was sent for treatment anywhere, those evaluations. Bishop Fisher, I spoke to him on Ash Wednesday, actually had a nice conversation with him when I was in town. And he said then that they can't release any kind of treatment files because it's governed by HIPAA laws, which is a convenient fig leaf for the good bishop. But those treatment evaluations, if he had any kind of evaluation done after he was put on leave, that paper trail is in his file. It is discoverable, and I think it could be subpoenaed in discovery.
The diocese releasing a statement saying that they learned of the horrific allegations at the same time the general public learned of them. But it seems like that from what we heard yesterday in this news conference that a lot of people don't necessarily believe that sort of events.
I don't want to speculate about that because I think that the arrest probably did come out of the blue. You know, the police, the feds would not be tipping their hand to the bishop even under the best of circumstances. If the diocese has had a clean record and cooperative in the past, even then, those, the police, law enforcement would not be keeping them in the loop. So I do believe that's probably true, that they may have only found out about the horrendous extent of this child pornography that Father Nowak was involved with. Yet they certainly knew all kinds of things about him prior to that should have really precipitated greater supervision and greater sanctions than what he had faced.
Do you think with continued pressure, the bishop will consider releasing these?
It would take a court order, and I certainly hope it gets to that point. But look at all of the pressure that we've been putting on 3 bishops now in the last 8 or so years that really doesn't seem to have changed the culture. There are many good priests in the Diocese of Buffalo. I know many good priests, but there is a culture of smugness about their, I think, secret lifestyles. As a gay man, I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone's orientation, but there's a subculture that gives culture to crime. That there's all of these secrets and blackmail going on among the clergy of the Diocese of Buffalo, that should they find out that one of their confreres is committing a crime, I don't think that they would tell.
Well, James, thank you for joining us, and nice to talk with you again. James Faluszczak is a former priest, abuse survivor, here joining us live on WBEN.